see that, but this is actually in your presenter mode.
Okay.
Thank you.
Apologize for this technical issues. So I think let's start. Well, today I would like to share with you on a couple of things. Basically my presentation actually is split into two parts. One is the what I call the China piece, and then the other one is really Hong Kong. But because most of the people actually know more about Hong Kong than China, that's why I will spend a little bit more time on China than the other one. So without further ado, I just dive right in. And I guess the first part is about China and on the API first strategy, and also the financial service sector in China. And as you can probably see, the first one, on China, the regulatory body is pretty, has been reformed for the last couple of years, and I think the first part is the SDC, the Financial Stability and Development Committee, which is the key piece, within the financial body. They try to create a super financial supervisory body in China, and that's why this becomes even the parent of the PBOC, which dictates the monetary policy, etc. in China. And the most important two regulatory bodies in China would be the CBIRC, which oversees the insurance and banking sector, whereas the CSRC is oversee the securities market. And obviously those two, a lot of them actually have a lot of commonality, especially when you're talking about the financial economy, and also when especially when you play when the technology play in place, you can see the convergence, graduate into China, because at the moment everything is segregated. From banks cannot do securities, and then also futures companies entirely separate, and then trust company is not a bank, so it's a bit complicated. But that's how they regulate it, and that's how they minimize the risk, the market risk as well. And that's why first you need to understand this whole regulatory framework, before when you start entering China, and ultimately understand how how dynamic works within industry. So the next one is really in terms of licenses, and already mentioned, because of the complexity, there's all these different licenses. On the left hand side, these are the traditional financial licenses in China today, and then on the right hand side, these are the exciting bit, because the online financial entities has been formed for the last 12 to 15 years. And probably the first one is actually the third-party payment, which is Alipay, WeChat Pay, etc. That happens already more than a decade ago, and that was set the wave of the transformation in the entire financial industry. It started from payment, and then a couple of years later, in about 2012, there comes the consumer finance and microcredit companies that is starting to not just enter the market, but actually making the so-called the service offerings to the unbanked population. And then in the more recent days, in this 2014, that's a landmark for I guess the major milestone for the financial industry in China, which is the digital bank. The first digital bank was actually set by My Bank, which is part of Tencent Group, and the internet banks is actually a brand new license. That was issued by China's government. And then before that, very interesting, the direct banks, you also require the banks are also require a license to operate as a direct bank. Well, the difference between a digital bank and direct bank is that the direct bank is actually like a department of a Chinese bank, and they just launch online services, right? And this is often regarded as the first stage before you become a digital bank. And that's why most of many big banks in China today already have the direct bank licenses. They utilize those, have that departments to actually drive a lot of the technology innovations and the digital transformation as well. And then now came the internet banks, which is the later stage, which is like I said, My Bank, and then WeBank, etc. And a lot of things are happening also at the same time. The internet insurance actually, I think this year, some have been issued the license as well. And that's why if you look at all this landscape, it's actually pretty exciting. And all of things are going online. All of them are brand new. And some of them are actually set up by technology companies. Some of them are by banks. And then eventually, I think, it will be foreign places as well, because as we speak, UBS actually already stated that they have absolute desire to open up apply the license of a digital bank this year. And I haven't heard anything yet, but the UBS already made that announcement, and sort of acknowledged by the Chinese government as well. So they actually want to launch a digital bank in China and to launch their wealth business. And then eventually they want to use the same technology. Will create a brand new technology in China, and then eventually they want to lift out and then ship it overseas to service other locations as well. So that is going to be something to keep an eye on. And then this is actually a very interesting slide as well, because on the left hand side you see the incumbent banks. It's just a subset of it. Obviously, it's got like 4,000 banks in China today. And on the left hand side you got incumbent banks, and then you also have the so-called spin-offs. And the spin-offs is actually by the banks. That means ICBC have the Fintech spin-off, and CIB have the spin-off, and probably the most well-known in Hong Kong probably is the One Connect. It's actually by Ping An Group. They actually had a spin-off a few years back already, and that's why what's interesting is that this spin-off is actually it's a entirely separate entity, and as some of the banks are actually have an entirely different set of payroll. The structure is different, and that's how you make innovation work. Because otherwise, the internet, the guys from the internet industry don't want to join the banking industry, a legacy industry, and with no innovations and no lack of innovation. So that's why the fintech is about 12 of them today in China, and all of these are actually not just trying to serve the mothership, but they also want to break into the third-party market as well. They want to do a lot of other cool stuff. Then some of them actually bought the payment operators as well in China. And in the middle part, obviously, is the all of this, the fintech, different fintechs in China. And today there are about 65, so-called fintech conglomerate in China. And those are, not just the usual names, usual suspect, like WeChat and the Tencent Group, etc. But a lot of them are actually property developers. And Geely is also entering the financial service group, automobile company. And so a lot of them are actually buying different, applying different licenses or making acquisition to. And you can imagine, if a lot of them are becoming like an financial group, that's going to be a pretty, massive market. And what's interesting is that every one of them try to create their own financial ecosystem, and they want to get their foot into the door, and they try to make an influence. And of course, they want to create, additional revenue for their own group as well. And then on the right hand side, this is what I mentioned just now, the internet banks. And so this is actually some banks that WeBank, MyBank, etc. And then below are the fintechs. And I think a lot of the fintechs, in China has been on the rise. And for example, 2019, I think, according to the Ministry of Commerce, about 250,000 company actually registered as an AI company. Then obviously, not all of them are really AI, technology company, but I think it just tells you the speed of the evolution in China. And a lot of the startup is actually entering the market. A lot of them actually I've seen, actually met actually global players actually coming in, or actually or Chinese returnees, coming set up companies, and as well some professors, from the well-known university in the West, actually coming here, partner with some local players, and then created companies. And from blockchain, ABCD, right? From artificial intelligence to blockchain to cloud, big data, etc. And what's one more point I want to make is that what's interesting in the China financial ecosystem is that we're not talking about just software. We also talk about hardware. Insular, Huawei, those are the giants in China. They sell databases, middleware, and a lot of people don't know Huawei. They have the entire ecosystem in the hardware chain. They are basically the equivalent of IBM, Microsoft, Amazon, Oracle combined, and they have also any product that you can imagine. And then the solution provider like Hudson, those are the special, sort of market providers, and then information provider, the equivalent of Bloomberg, like Wind and iFind in China. So this is actually a very complete, financial ecosystem in China today. And one more thing forgot to mention is that is actually making a wake-up call for a lot of the incumbent banks is that WeBank, for example, was set up in 2014. Within 3 years' time, they made profits, and by 2019, they actually has reached $21 billion US dollar of revenue, and then with $500 million US dollar of net income. And if you just look at that, I mean, it's even as I understand from the European neobanks or challenger bank are not even in the black yet, and that's why this is something that is quite interesting to see in China on whether it's sustainable in future. Next is actually the regulation. I think it's something that it's unfortunate. It's not coming as far as we liked, and only recently, early this year, the PBOC have released the commercial bank API security management guideline. This is regarded as probably the first step of the launching the API regulation full force in China. And in parallel, there's a document called the Development of China Open Banking Report 2019. You can actually look it up in the internet, and prepared by the consortium, the National Internet Finance Association of China, along with the ENY, that provides the insight of the viewpoint of the China industry standard. That's a very comprehensive report about that, and giving advice, how China should evolve, and then in terms of API standard. And at the same time, there are a lot of banks, as I know, CIB, I know people working there already in talk with PBOC. They have a consortium to work together to drive a standard. In China, it's actually a bottom-up approach where a more liberal approach was taken, and better for worse at least at this point. But at the same time, a lot of the collective information has been gathered, and as we heard, it's actually within this year, or maybe postponed by the COVID-19. But I think soon there will be a regulation that will be serviced, and along with the data security law already come out as a consultation paper this year, and then the data privacy law will come out soon as well, and all of them will be similar to the GDPR, in Europe, and that's why all of this will coincide, and then ultimately come up with a lot of the new regulation in China to drive the market forward. So this is quickly one of the case, the CIB. What I like about CIB is that they already into banking as a service, even close to 7-9 years ago, without, even before people talk about open API, they already launched a service and service about 300 small and medium-sized banks in China, and using banking as a service. So it could be hosted as a server, core banking system, subscribed by some of the agricultural bank, in a small rural bank in China, which lack the technology people, etc. So they already started this journey, less than 10 years ago. And now this slide actually tells you they're taking the next step forward. About 2 years ago, they launched this, what they call the credit lending cloud. This is actually based on a CIB Fintech arm that created this system along with the Fintech partners, because obviously even CIB themselves don't have all the complete so-called sets of technology solution and the people skill as well. So they come up with the with the partnership with the fintech players, and then jointly they launch a service for the small banks, small banks in China. So today I think there are about like 3 or 4 banks already signed up for that. And so what it means is that they actually push the service out to it's like more like a private labels service, and the lenders can actually leverage all the underwriting technology and the client acquisition technology, etc. Through this cloud. And then also some other external partners will be on the far left-hand side. It's actually the co-lending banks can actually join in with the lenders to lend this money out to the borrowers. And so I think that this is some kind of model that CIB came up, and it may or may not become the model for other banks to follow. And the next one is the Construction Bank of China and other mega banks in China. So this is something that a similar approach as CIB, except that they have far more partnership that they export the service to. Even though the CCB Cloud have the core banking system, the so-called the lending services, etc., they also have connected. If in China, if you open the app, in China, most of the China banking app, you don't just have the banking services. You have a lot of lifestyle services as well. You can book, you can actually book a movie ticket and through the app, and also you can pay your phone bills, at a click of a button, and everything is seamless. And this is actually packaged and then for bundled and then provided to some of the platform players. It could be Pinduoduo or other players, that they want, that they want the banking service to tie with their backend. So that's why the partnership is actually delivering, and for the CCP cloud service, and also the last bit is the local government in terms of public service, and all this is quite interesting, because it's because of the API services, it cut down the so-called the authentication to 10 times, for example, because you need to authenticate ID, etc. So I guess on the China piece, I think that the challenge is that is unregulated market, and so the unregulated market is actually all depends on industry at the moment, and which is being also criticized by some of the consultants about okay, it's not really standardized, and it's all driven by the big players like Tencent and Ali. But eventually, I strongly believe that it will change, because it's there's no way that it's sustainable. You have all these different players forming different standards. It's not going to work, and that's why that is a big challenge for China to actually, for the regulator as well, to come up with that. And the other part is that the competitive environment is that there's so many ecosystems already exist, formed by the Ant Financial, by the Tencent, by the Jingdong, JD, and so many of them already exist. So how do you actually, even as a player, how do you actually further connect to that, and how can you provide even better service? Because a lot of them actually, if you look going back to the banking app, a lot of them look similar. So what's the differentiator for that? What better service can you provide? What better products can you provide? I think this is probably like the Fintech 2.0 that China need to go through to break that into, break into the market. And then the last bit is that the incumbent banks are moving fast. And even though even I thought the incumbent banks is extremely slow technology, less technology savvy, but it's actually far more than I can imagine, especially if you think about, like ICBC a couple of years ago, they did a major digital transformation, and part of it is to replace Oracle. As you probably heard, the DIOE initiative in China, they want to get rid of the Oracle, IBM, and EMC because of the cost, right? They want to save cost, but a lot of the banks don't want to do that, because it's obviously we want to get rid of the IBM mainframe, right? It's so reliable, right, for decades. But ICBC actually bite the bullet and actually replace everything with Huawei. And so a lot of the bank, not everything, but a lot of the major system actually run at the back. The infrastructure is actually run by Huawei now, and that's part of the major transformation. And then in the same time, they want to provide better service to the clients, and that's why the fintech company, the spin-off, have been created by all this different big banks in China today. And so I think these are the challenges for the China financial market, and it is not something that would be overlooked, and especially in years to come. It's even though they are very tech savvy and so on, but in reality, there's still a lot of challenges ahead of them. Now, if I go to Hong Kong, I think most of the people probably in this audience, all the audience, understand about the financial regulatory structure in Hong Kong, the SFC, obviously the securities market, and then the Hong Kong MA, the banking, and the insurance authority, obviously the insurance market. And next is the license, and again, it's relatively simple because it's a very mature market in Hong Kong. The banking and, for example, 3-tier banking system. I mean, these are the only 3 licenses that you can get in Hong Kong under Hong Kong MA. And securities, you get up to 10 different sort of licenses that you can obtain, from the SFC. Now the exciting bit is the virtual bank, and I think it's a long-waited, sort of license, for Hong Kong, which I think everyone is excited about. And even though there's some delay, especially over through the COVID-19, I think this is something that I think is really going to make some major change in China, in Hong Kong, in time to come. And needless to, I'm not going to go through all the details, but I think most people understand what the virtual banks entail. And this slide actually is a very business-like, but I think this is interesting because if you compared to China, Hong Kong is a far more cosmopolitan city and also global city. And here you can see basically, all the players are actually consists of global players and local, some Hong Kong players, and then also the emerging Chinese players, entering the Hong Kong market as well. And this, again, I think from this perspective is actually pretty exciting as well. And I think all of this is actually is going to pave the way for Hong Kong in years to come. And of course, the 8 sort of licensed, virtual bank already in play, and 6 of them already in service. They already launched a service already. And as a matter of fact, a couple of days ago, I just registered 2 of them, just to try the experience. So I think this is definitely exciting for Hong Kong. And the next one is Rick. I'm not going to go through this, but I think most people who are in this market already know very well which stage we're in. And of course, I think Hong Kong is a top-down approach where they, actually is regulated and then they want to push it to the market. But I think for a good reason, because it's been long criticized, by the market and by a lot of the outsiders about, the lack of innovation in the Chinese financial ecosystem, and also the banks especially, and because it's dominated by big banks and the local banks are too small to make any changes, and the big banks are, probably they already obtained market share, so there's no reason for them to innovate. And so this is actually going to change, Hong Kong. And here, again, I'm not going to mention it. I think it's just a summary of all the 8 banks where they are right now, or what sort of services they have. And I think all of this is interesting because it's a mixture of the shareholder, especially if you look at the structure. A lot of them are global and local, and Hong Kong as well. So I think this is something that is unlike China, which is mostly Chinese, but here is pretty exciting because that means there are a lot of foreign players who can come to play in this market. And then the probably this is the last slide I have. It's for the talk today, and in here these are some of the global players because virtual bank is too new to see. We can't really say what even though they have their plan, but it's not very concrete. But the other big banks actually have been in the open API space. They've been pretty active. Citibank, for example, they're probably the far most active, and they already have these services they can import to Hong Kong. A couple of years back already, and then DBS again, one of the leading digital bank in the region, and then Standard Chartered and HSBC even launched the I think it was a corporate. Was it a corporate business unit where they can I forgot the launch of Open API, the first Open API for business account opening with Nova, in May this year. So all of this is actually quite exciting. But I think the difference between the Hong Kong and China for this challenges is the upcoming challenges. I think in Hong Kong it's a relatively smaller market, and it's a crowded market, crowded by all these big banks and small banks already, a couple hundred banks already. So how does the virtual bank go to differentiate themselves, right? That's one question. And the other one is that the ecosystem, again, going back by earlier statement where it's widely criticized about the lack of innovation. Why do we still use octopus card, and how come we can not use a smartphone to swipe and go in? Well, actually, it does happen now already. But the point is that it's not innovative, enough, as a modern city. And even China, in a lot of ways, are actually leading. So that's why there's a lot of room for improvement. But the API economy itself, how to actually break the ice and actually enter the market, and like I said earlier, the lifestyle, how to integrate the lifestyle economy into the API or through API to integrate the banking services, and then have that so-called enclosed together to provide this brand new service to the customers. And I think this is a challenge for China, for Hong Kong. And the last part is that, which is interesting, which yesterday I had a conversation with a friend of mine from Hong Kong, and just saying that the Hong Kong retailer or the customer is actually quite conservative. And that resonated with one was, I think it was at the EMY survey that was created this year or last year, that the in terms of the consumer trust, there's a 4 quadrant. The high consumer trust and high standard, all the way to the low consumer trust to low standard. And Hong Kong fits in the second quadrant, which is the low consumer trust and I'll say low standards. But it's actually emerging. It's actually Singapore and Hong Kong actually are doing pretty well in self-standardization because it launches this standard already. And then China, on the other hand, is actually low standard, but actually high consumer trust. So that means that people want to try new things. And I know all the people around me in China today, they all, I don't see anyone who use cash anymore, right? So no one carrying the bills outside. So I think, how do you break this in Hong Kong? And how do you change this customer behavior in Hong Kong? Even though if you provide the API economy, and even you have all these brand new services from virtual banking, etc., if people don't even want to share the data, for example, and they're scared. And so this is something that I think the market need to convert the mindset, the consumer mindset, and that I presume it would probably one of the major challenges in Hong Kong. And I guess this concludes my presentation. But regardless of Hong Kong or China, I think definitely I think we're in an extremely exciting time. And what I would like to see is actually the convergence between Hong Kong and China, and how do they actually cross the border. Of course, even forget about the renminbi, open up the market economy in Hong Kong, in China, etc. But the technology flow between the two sides, a lot of the lessons learned from technology company in China can actually export some of them or share the lessons learned into Hong Kong. And also Hong Kong has a lot of cool companies, tech companies that are pretty advanced, and then they can also share experience in China or enter China. So I think this will be very interesting to see how it's going to emerge, in the years to come. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Brett. Let me try to. Okay, so I can see in the stage there's quite many questions, but we don't have time to answer that. But can you share your personal contact in the chat room? I can see that some of the people want to get your slide, and maybe they want to have some further question to ask you. I think sorry for the technical issue, but I think this is a really good section that everyone is looking for. So thanks for your time, Greg. So yeah.
Pleasure.